Hello and welcome to the Belfast International Arts Festival event in association with Westival. Delighted you can join us. My name is Hjördling Smee and I'm the manager of Film Hub NI. Tonight's event sees the return to the festival of Robert Webb, who brings his debut novel, Come Again. Robert is known for many things: writing, acting in shows on TV and radio such as Peep Show, That Mitchell and Webb Look, and for his best-selling memoir, How Not to Be a Boy. Come Again sees Robert branch out into fiction, tell the tale of Kate Marsden, a time-travelling adventure navigating grief and loss. Hosted by John Self, the festival's literary manager, tonight's discussion is a chance to hear from Robert about writing, acting, time travel, and the near-death experience. Copies of Come Again are available from No Alibi's bookstore on Botanic Avenue, with a limited supply of signed copies. Support from tonight's event comes from the Department of Foreign Affairs of the Government of Ireland. Very many thanks for their generous support. If you enjoyed tonight's event, do check out the other literary events happening across the festival on their website. You may particularly enjoy the American writer Jenny Offal talking about her new book Weather on the final weekend of the festival. So, without further ado, sit back and enjoy Robert Webb talking to John Self.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this event in Belfast International Arts Festival in association with Westival as part of our Talks and Ideas strand. We're delighted today to welcome Robert Webb to the festival. Robert Webb needs very little introduction. He's a writer, actor, performer and dancer, known for appearances on radio, film and TV, including back in Fresh Meat and in Peep Show. He's the author of a memoir, How Not to Be a Boy, and also a novel, Come Again, and it's Come Again that we're here to talk about today. Robert, welcome to the festival. Would
Hello.
You like to, in the traditional way, give us a little short reading from the book to begin with, to give people a flavour of what it's about?
Sure. Hello. Yes, thank you for having me. Okay, so we'll begin at the beginning, and then I don't have to bore everyone senseless with what's just happened. Chapter 1. She woke with her mouth forming a single word, you. This was how they always ended, her dreams of Luke. The details varied, but they would always be together, alone in his room back in college. Two people still in their teens, asking their first questions, sharing their first jokes. Kate noticed the freckle on her knee showing through his ripped jeans, his ready smile, the way he tilted his head when he listened. The 28-year conversation was a few hours old, the first night of their first week. This was the beginning. She sat in a little armchair in the corner of his student room, Kurt Cobain watching her with an intelligent smirk from the Nirvana poster on the wall opposite. Below Kurt, sitting on his bed and leaning against the wall, was Luke, similarly slim but darker, unbleached, and with a face that had seen less trouble. He was jiggling his foot off the edge of the bed. Kate had just given him something to jiggle about. I mean, I wouldn't have to take all my clothes off, right? Kate adjusted the A4 pad on her lap and carried on sharpening her pencil. No, of course not. Just slip your shirt off if you like. The trouble is, I'm not good enough to draw clothes. That pyjama top will present quite a challenge. She looked up from her pencil to meet his mock-insulted gaze. It's not a pyjama top, he said, slightly pouting. It's a granddad shirt. Ah, yes, of course, Kate smiled. The blue and grey stripy cotton thing with 4 open buttons at the top that definitely doesn't look like you're wearing pyjamas. Luke pinched the top of his shirt to one side and frowned at it. Yes, it's possible, he nodded like a barrister. It's possible that there is a resemblance with... Abruptly, he glanced up at her. Hang on, where did you get that pencil sharpener from? This is my room, isn't it? Kate stopped turning the pencil and took a breath. No, not yet. Let's not wake up yet. The intrusion of logic threatened to end the dream too soon. She felt the beginning of a rise towards consciousness, but resisted it by talking. She wanted to stay right here, in this room, in this moment. She wanted to stay here forever. Oh, it's my pencil sharpener. I carry it around everywhere in case I run into a boy I want to seduce. Luke stopped jiggling his foot. I'm being seduced, am I? Certainly. Why do you think I told you to strip? You don't think I can actually draw, do you? Luke looked around the room with a mixture of surprise and excitement. To be honest, yes, I did think you would at least make a token effort. Kate put the drawing materials to one side and moved over to sit beside him on the bed. And what else was going to happen after I had made a token effort? She ran her hand slowly over the shoulder of his shirt, her fingers tracing the V shape of the top buttons down to where they melt a sprinkling of chest hair. She knew this body like no other. 19-year-old Luke, Luke in his 20s, Luke in his 30s, And then, halfway through his 40s, he gave her the quizzical smile that always signaled the end of the dream. He said, "What's the matter?" She searched his face helplessly. "You died." He took her hand gently and said, "I know, my love, I know. But you have to wake up." "Can't, don't want to." "Can't, you can, sweetheart. Rise. Go to the doctor, you're still young. The tumour's tiny now, they can take it out, you can..." "Kate, my love," he said, "it's too late." Luke looked down at their hands. She followed his gaze, down to their wedding rings and back up into the eyes of her middle-aged husband. He said, "You're going to be all right, Kate. Come on, you know things. You're the girl from the future." She gently took her hand away and whispered, "I'm not going to be anything like all right." "Get some help." "No," she said with certainty. "No one can help me, and I've had enough of the future."
Thank you very much, Robert. Thank you. So for those of us who haven't read it, that gives us a flavour of the story. If I say it's about cancer, death, loss, and grief, it doesn't sound like much fun, but it is. I mean, it is much fun, isn't it?
I hope so. Yeah, I mean, it all cheers up from there on. Really, I had to sort of start at the bottom. Yeah, what we've got is Kate, who we get to know in that first part, and she's in terrible grief. And she and Luke met many years ago, in 1992, when they were freshers, when they were students. But she lost him a few months ago, and then one day she wakes up. She's 18 years old. It's 1992. She's in the wrong body, but she remembers everything. She's 18, but this was the day that she met Luke for the first time. She knows how he died. She thinks she's there to save him. So she's going to try and win his trust. She's going to try and do everything exactly the same. Hence comedy, because you can't do everything exactly the same. So we meet Kate. We meet in her considerable distress. She's not getting better. She's a danger to herself. And then we have this moment where she wakes up in 1992 with the head of a middle-aged person remembering everything from 2020, except the main thing from 2020, which I wasn't aware of when I was writing this book in 2018 and 19. But then it's a pandemic-free 2020, so enjoy that.
And aside, I mean, you've already summarised it. It really sounds quite complex, but there's a lot going on in the book. There's the love story. There's effectively time travel. There's actual baddies and car chases and stuff. I mean, it's value for money, that's for sure. I mean, this is your first novel. Is it a situation where you found that you were overflowing with ideas? You hadn't written a novel before, and did they all come easily, or was it not quite like that?
Yeah, I gather it happens to first time arounders that they try and put everything in, and maybe I've done that. But I mean, the idea just came to me a long time ago. I mean, I hasten to add, it hasn't happened since. I've been sitting around during lockdown expecting another fully formed idea to just occur to me, and it turns out it's not going to be like that next time around. But this was like back in 2012. I know because it was the Olympics were on, and that's why nobody went to see the film that I just made. And it just happened. Widow goes back in time, meets lost husband, but he's not the man that she lost. He's the annoying English student that she first met, and that's another of the comic avenues, really, that she's surrounded by not just Luke, but her lifelong friends, but the 18, 19-year-old versions of them. And I think we've all had this daydream. What would it be like to go back in time and fix the mistakes that we made, or do certain things differently? But you only have to think about it for another 5 seconds before you realize it would be intensely isolating and very lonely. And she just knows all this stuff that they don't know, not just of the future of world events, but their futures. She knows which directions her friends are heading. So there's all that. But yes, there's a lot of jokes, and I wanted, and hopefully have succeeded in having the trajectory of the book to be just one big, it's deliberately written to be very easy to read. It's a complicated, there's a lot going on in it, but it's not hard, and it's entertainment, I think, was the watchword. I just wanted to entertain the reader and to make sure they had a good time.
And Kate, she's quite a distinctive character. She's I suppose you describe her as a bit of a techie geek, for one thing. She's got this. She's a former karate expert.
Yeah.
She kind of evades stereotypes. I'm wondering if you were keen to avoid that sort of well, there's a Twitter account called Men Writing Women, full of passages
Yes.
from John Updike and Martin Amis of women, characters admiring their breasts and things like that. Were you keen to avoid that?
Yes, I was aware of that account, and I was aware of not just that account, but generally the cliche of the male novelist who takes a female protagonist, and just the more obvious man traps and problems that were potential for patronizing and slighting and just being awful. At no point is Kate going to stand in front of a mirror naked and admire her own breasts. I do get from, the secret ingredient really is listening to women. Apart from reading women and talking to women, listening to women, you eventually get the idea that they don't actually find their own bodies fantastically erotic 24 hours a day. Would you believe it, any more than we do, us, our own bodies? So I mean, a lot of it is quite easy to avoid, really. There are sort of moments where and also I gave myself a sort of, not quite a get out of jail card, but I think I gave myself an advantage in that Kate is specifically not the girl next door. She is a very unusual person. I've given her these very unusual attributes. So it's not like she's not the only female character. Obviously, there are another 4 or 5 women who come in and out of the book. If this were a movie, it would be a good part, and any of the other women, it would be sort of my size part the kind of part I'd be given. So it's not like Kate's there to represent all women. That would be horrible. So there's that, and also the fact that she's so unusual, I think, guards against a lot of the dodgy area that I could have got myself into. I hijacked my own thought there. Oh well, cliche. She's unusual. Oh yeah. But there are some areas. I mean, I think men and women are very similar, but obviously they have different life experiences based on their sex sometimes. And there are certain areas that I just don't think a reader is going to accept from me. So I mean, we're not going to go into Kate's. We're not going to go very far into Kate's sexuality. I think some male authors could do that, but I think if the guy who used to play Jeremy in Peep Show starts talking about what it's like for a woman to have an orgasm, I think there's just so much that they're just not going to. They're not going to take it from me. So I sort of feel that for once my the voice that is sort of that exists before I started writing books, the voice that people read my books in, because they know if they know me from Peep Show, or they know me from That Witch in the Web look, or indeed that they know me from the journalism I've done before, there is an established voice, and I most of the time that's a useful thing. But occasionally I think it comes with limitations, and I think that's one of them. I can't really go out there at the moment. I don't think I have license to be too experimental or to push too many boundaries. I think I have I exist in a certain place at the moment.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, isn't it? Though, I mean, is there a sense there that with future? I know you've said in other interviews that you want to keep writing books now, and you almost see that as your kind of main path now. But is there a sense that you might want to challenge those perceptions of, as Jeremy gets further and further into the past?
I think, I'm always going to love Jeremy. I'm always going to be very grateful to Peep Show, and I'm not going to retire from acting. I like acting too much to stop, and I couldn't afford to retire anyway. But I certainly want to write a lot. I want to write more novels, and I see that as, I sort of imagine that will be a gradual thing. I think if I sat down now and said, I'm going to write the sort of book that gets nominated for prizes, I think that would immediately invite distorted writing. I think it would come out pretentious, and there would be moments of strained lyricism where there ought to be jokes, and I think it would just be a misbegotten creation, and it would come out malformed. So I think what I should do is carry on just writing the books that I would want to read. I mean, that's what Come Again is. It's the kind of book that I would really enjoy reading. and I should carry on doing that. And eventually, I imagine if this happens at all, that I write something respectable. Maybe that will be in my, I don't know, 70s. That's like book 12 in my 70s. People have noticed that I'm actually quite good, and by then I really know what I'm doing, and they give me some sort of sympathy nomination.
Well, there is actually, you talk about that sort of strained lyricism and, sort of the forced attempt at a prize-winning type book. And there is, of course, in the book, there's Luke's writing, which is I find really funny. I took it as a sort of a kind of an amalgam of the sort of exaggeration of Martin Amis will self type thing. Was that the aim?
Yes, that was the inspiration. Absolutely, I love Martin Amis. Certainly, I mean, it's a heritage love these days. But I mean, I certainly love those the ones that people, Money and London Fields and The Information in particular. I adore those books, and I loved his experience as well. But there is a way of there's an affectionate parody to be done there, and I managed a couple of paragraphs of that before withdrawing, exhausted. I mean, the idea that he keeps that up for a whole book. And so I've got Luke is one of the annoying things about Luke is that he's a bad writer, and Kate has had to put up with this endless book that he can't find an ending to for all of these years. And it's one of the things that she didn't. It's one of the drawbacks of being married to Luke. So we do meet because we have to talk about Luke's subconscious and stuff that Luke is aware of through his writing. And so there are a couple of paragraphs of his sub-Amis heavily. It's what someone with no talent would write like if they were heavily influenced by Martin Amis. It's not me having a go at Martin Amis. I've got no business having a go at Martin Amis. I hugely respect him, but he's quite easy to parody, and I hope I've done a good one.
Well, anyone's like that. Anyone with distinctive voices like that, I guess. I mean, you look at great writers like Nick Hornby and Helen Fielding, who created these new genres, really, but they're followed by lots of people who maybe don't have quite the same ability. But just to talk, to go back to the subject of the book. So in the book, Luke dies, or has died rather, of a brain tumor. And there's a story there, isn't there, that how that turned out for you to be a bit more close to reality than you expected when you were writing it?
Yeah, I mean, I just mentioned that the excuse rather for the Amos bit is that we want to take a look at Luke's subconscious, and I was writing that while at the same time I had a very serious problem with my heart that I didn't know about. And I was writing this character who has a very serious problem with his brain that he doesn't know about. And it turned out, I finished the book, I finished the edits, and then we were going to make series 2 of Back, which is a Channel 4 show I do with David Nicholls. And I went for the cast medical, and the GP put his stethoscope on my heart, and he pulled a face and said, oh, what are we doing about the heart murmur then? And I said, what heart murmur? And then the studio laughter died down, and he said, I think you should go and see someone. I went to see a cardiologist, and he said, you're not going to have a heart attack. It turned out I have a prolapsed mitral valve. One of the valves in my heart was, instead of opening and shutting like that, was just doing this, which meant all the blood in one chamber of the heart was flowing backwards into another chamber. And the cardiologist said, you're not going to have a heart attack in the next 2 weeks, but if this issue is not addressed, then in the next 2 or 4 or 6 months, this heart will fail. So that got my attention. As unfortunately, this is not something we can fix with pills. So it turned out, 10 days later, I was having open heart surgery, and it went very well. And 4 months later, I managed to do the rest of Back until we stood down for COVID, and then we just lately actually finished it. So it's all fine now. I've just got a manly scar, but yes, it did occur to me that was my imagination trying to get my attention, that I've been this middle-aged, he's exactly my age, this middle-aged man, a fatal health problem that he knows absolutely nothing about. And I wrote that in a book.
Well, and of course we've spoken about Martin Amis, and he's very strong in that, even his new book, which is like Experience 2, by the way, if you haven't seen it yet. He
We'll get all of it.
How the subconscious is the one that does all the work in writing fiction.
Yes, in Experience, he talks about Lucy Partington, doesn't he? And
Yeah.
Yes, missing people in the separations and how that's affected his fiction.
Yeah, and I just read a quote from Kevin Barry this morning, actually, where he says, with fiction, you're dealing with all the dreamy, oily, murky stuff back there. You know, that's where it all comes from.
Yeah.
So you've written your novel, and I mean, just thinking about other writers or comedians and performers who have got novels out. You know, we've got Ruth Jones has a novel out. Dawn French has written almost as many as F. Scott Fitzgerald now, and Richard Osman has his novel out. Do you think there's an appeal for comedians or performers to write novels, in the sense that there's this sort of snobbery, if you like, still that pertains about literature being a sort of a higher calling, or something that's taken more seriously than acting or comedy?
I think there's always, in whatever form, there's always a snobbery about somber things being more important than funny things.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always had the belief that you can say serious things through humour, and just as effectively as through non-humour. And in fact, quite often jokes will reach places that are more, I don't want to say serious, that a more sombre approach won't. So there's never been any doubt in my mind. But I mean, in the culture, there's no question. I mean, you look at, you know, the Oscars, and you know what was nominated. You know, Groundhog Day. This is my bugbear. Groundhog Day was never nominated for an Oscar in a year that you got The Crying Game. Oh, fuck off. And you know, Groundhog Day, clearly one of the best films ever made. Never mind the best comedy ever made. So that's just one example. But I mean, there's a lot of that about. In terms of what I'm doing, I don't see much of a difference really. There's a big difference between acting and writing, but I was a writer before I started earning a living as an actor. Anyway, I mean, I was, and at school I was writing. At primary school, I was reading my funny stories out to the class way before I was writing sketches. But then David and I were subsisting as sketch writers 5 years before the first series of Peep Show came along. So to me, I've always been a writer. But I also had this thing about I wanted to be funny on the TV, and I got to do that. But sometimes, you know, what you want to do when you're 13 isn't necessarily what you want to do when you're 47. And as I've said, I don't want to stop acting, but this just seemed like the natural way to carry on entertaining people, but through writing. I like the solitariness of it. I like, you know, I've had 20 years of collaborating with really talented and wonderful people, but sometimes you just want to be on your own. And this, boy, oh boy, this is a good way to be on your own. And also the fact you don't have to negotiate with anyone. But then, you know, when it comes to Come Again, I'm happy to say is going to be adapted for television, but not by me. Someone else is going to do that job. So sometimes, you know, you get to do the thing and it's completely your vision. You have an editor, in my case, Francis Bickmore, brilliantly helps, but it's your thing. And then if it has another life, then it's time for another talent to come along and another person, another set of eyes to see all the tricks that I've missed and all the things and they can go away. They can completely rock and roll with that. I'm not going to have much to do with it unless they want to ask me questions. But so you know, you get to have it both ways. But I'm enjoying the responsibility and the control of it being my thing.
Yeah, and you're going to keep your nose out of the adaptation. Then it's nothing to do.
Yeah, I'll be there as a consultant. Also, I mean, she'll talk. I'm not allowed to say who it is yet, but we know whether she's a man or a woman. Suddenly, she'll get to. We'll talk as often as the writer wants to, but I won't be doing any actual work.
I'm trying to think now that you mentioned Groundhog Day, what the last out-and-out comic film to win an Oscar was. It was probably, was it our Best Picture Oscar, Annie Hall, possibly?
It was probably by Howard Jacobson. I mean, because he usually does the first thing, didn't he? He was like the first basically funny book to win the Booker, wasn't it? Was that Zoo Time or the Finkler Question?
Finkler Question, yeah, about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I've been reading some of this year's Booker list, and I mean, there's some humour in there, but it does I guess, maintain a reputation for that sort of, as you say, sober, not serious, because the opposite of funny isn't serious. The opposite of funny is not funny, isn't it?
I think as soon as you start making the reader laugh, I think because it's a sort of universal competence that we're all funny and we all know how to make, at least people that we know how to make them laugh. And so it's, I mean, you see a stand-up, for example, a really good stand-up, you can kind of go, oh, he's like, who makes everyone feel like they could be up there doing that because he's making it look so easy, as opposed to, say, someone on the level of Robin Williams, who's clearly a genius and clearly nobody else could do that. Very, very few other people could do that, and that's a different kind of experience. But humor is just something we all do all the time. So as soon as you make the reader laugh, they love you for it. But on the other hand, the familiarity, I think, means that you get a bit less respect, probably because it's just because you're friends now. Yeah, so why give a prize to?
Well, yeah, on that point about being friends, I mean, it also brings their defences down a bit, doesn't it? So you can kind of in there that you might not.
That was an important way for How Not to Be a Boy, the memoir that I wrote, to work in that I was trying to talk to men about masculinity, about which we can be a little bit punchy and defensive if it's put in the wrong way. And I think humour was a hugely important part of the way that book works, because you can just slip under the radar. It's like getting under someone's skin. So there was that, and the fact that I'd been pretty candid about my own mistakes and my own problems was the other way that I think I got male readers to lower their guard a bit. But yeah, so it's a very important tool, and I don't really see it. When it comes to the novel, I don't see it as a tool. Oh, I should now employ humor in this chapter. It's just the way I communicate. Not particularly in that first bit, by the way. I did think of maybe there should be a preceding chapter, a sort of prologue that's Luke and Kate's wedding, where she's being hilarious and it's just loads of jokes, and but I decided against that. I just decided to trust the reader that they'll. But I mean, my main worry was they'd be in a bookshop browsing and going, oh no, this looks a bit serious, and put it back. Turns out it's fine because all the bookshops were closed when this book was launched, so there was no browsing, so not to worry.
And you said that the writing process, you like being on your own. You quite like that escape from collaboration, or I guess from
escape from David Nicholls.
Yeah,
that's what I nearly said, isn't it? And I think that's what we all inferred.
Yeah, are you glad? By the way, you glad you got a novel in before he did?
I don't think David wants to, actually. I think he's seen that it can be really difficult. I think he's taken one look at his friends who are in the middle of a novel and going, that doesn't look like much fun. That's not as easy as saying witty things on Would I Lie to You? So I think he sees it as a cost benefit time analysis. It doesn't really seem worth his while.
Yeah, and that's the point, isn't it? You don't have that someone to bounce off. You don't have until you get to the end, at least I presume, of a draft. I've never written a novel myself, but you're on your own and you have to trust your instincts. When was it a difficult process? Because it's different even from writing a memoir, writing a novel.
Yeah, it was much harder than the first book, because I mean, with How Not to Be a Boy, I'd given myself a massive head start because I wrote the first 2 chapters and a 50-page document about what was going to happen in the rest of the book, and that's what went out to publishers. So because I wanted to impress upon them that I knew what I was doing and I was serious about it, and whereas Come Again, attached to that original pitch, was the idea for Come Again. It was a 2-book deal. When people ask, why a novel? The short answer is it was a 2-book deal. Here's book 2. But Come Again, I always wanted to write novels, and I wanted to get the memoir out of the way so that I didn't write a series of painfully autobiographical novels about a comedian called Robert Webb. So I did that. But attached to that document was the 2 paragraphs that I more or less said to you about Come Again. So that's what I started with. Okay, widow goes back in time, go. And then, so it turns out I wish I had planned it a bit more at the beginning before I started writing it. I don't think that would have made it a better book, but I think I would have had a less stressful time doing it, because I'm kind of I was just terrified the whole time that I was going to write myself into a corner and then become despondent and then just leave it for 6 months. And anyway, that didn't happen, but there were various moments where I got stuck. It should be difficult, and it is difficult.
And what I mean, if you could take one lesson from having written a novel now that you would take on to the next novel to make it easier for you, what would that be?
Plan it. Do the hard works first. I mean, what my comfort zone, obviously, for historical reasons, is dialogue, because I come from TV, comedy, and sketch writing. So I'm really happy when I've got characters talking. I just have to make sure that there's a point to what they're talking about, but I don't want it to be merely charming. But dialogue is sort of the treat that I give myself at the end of the hard work. The hard work is plot, and I think next time I will follow the example of Sam Bain and Jesse Armstrong, who wrote Peep Show, that they would plan the beats of every episode and they would rewrite until, and then the dialogue at the end was almost this kind of treat they gave themselves a couple of days before, after 6 months of worrying about the plot of a series. They do the words almost as an afterthought. And I don't think I could ever be as disciplined as that. Maybe I could, but I that's certainly the approach I'll try next time. That I'll be happy with the story before I start writing the sentences.
Yeah. And was there any sense in your mind of the fact that you've got a certain platform or celebrity, and that in a way publishers might make it too easy for you in a way that you didn't want it to be? They might not. Anyone will publish Robert Webb's first novel, right?
Yeah, no, I followed a strict policy of make it much, much better than it needs to be. How Not to Be a Boy and Come Again, as I say, were part of and Canongate liked the idea. In fact, they were almost more excited about the idea of Come Again than they were about the memoir. But because I'd done so much work on the memoir, they could see that it wasn't going to be just some tatty kind of, rags to riches, because the rags weren't that ragged and the riches aren't that rich. And so it wasn't that kind of, I'm just not famous enough to write a book that dull. So it had to do something, that first book, and I don't think it was doing something reasonably important, reasonably well. So after that, they were just drawn to the idea of the novel, and I think I convinced them that I knew I was a good enough writer to do the novel well. But we'll see. That might be it. Come Again might be the high watermark of my literary. I mean, it's not. I'm obviously going to get better. It'd be weird if I didn't get better, wouldn't it? Okay. So I'm looking forward to the new stuff. But it'll always be. Yeah, I'm not going to rely on Peep Show fans. They're very welcome to, but I'm not going to rely on Peep Show fans buying books by me just because I have happy associations with Jez. They're going to have to be very good books.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, speaking of Sam and Jesse from Peep Show, I mean, that show was an extraordinary petri dish, if that's maybe not the right term, of talent. With you and David going on to things, Simon Blackwell doing his films, and Jesse now rules the world with Succession, of course. Maybe any ambitions in that direction? Writing
a TV show like Succession? No. It's a bit like my imaginary David looking at what writing a novel feels like, and just going, no, that looks like too much hard work. A massive show like Succession. Quite apart from it, Jesse is brilliant. He's also one of the nicest, if not the nicest, men in show business. And it's just wonderful that he's, it's a provocation for a direct contemporary to have that much success, but I swear to God, and the same is true of Olivia Colman, I really couldn't be happier for them. All right, maybe with Collie, there's a bit of backlash. But with both of them, I'm just delighted. I don't want to work in America I don't want to collaborate with 9 other writers, and I don't want to do the, you know, I'm already moaning to you about having to do the plot for another novel, never mind the plot of a 10-part, 10 times 1 hour series. So, you know, it's all of the worst bits of writing as far as I'm concerned. I have no ambition. I don't even want to be in it. But I'm very, very, I loved watching it. I'm a big Succession fan. Can't wait to see season 3 of this season. They say season, don't they? Season 3.
Yeah. But you do have, I mean, you've done so many different things. You know, you've done sketch comedy, you've done TV series, you've done films and memoir, novel. You've been a columnist. Is there any sort of anything as grand as a career plan, or do you just follow your whims?
No, there's never been a plan. Well, there was a really weird kind of Michael Heseltine write it on the back of a postcard plan early on, which was get some unusually good A-level results, go to Cambridge, because Cambridge has this thing called the Cambridge Footlights. Yeah. And I bet I'm not the only one who wants to go there and see if they're funny and do funny things with other people. And I hope I meet someone like, say, David Mitchell. Oh my God, it's the actual David Mitchell. What a boon. So that was a plan. And then we, you know, I wrote it in my diary when I was 16 or so. It goes Cambridge, Radio 4, BBC 2, Channel 4. You know, that's what I wanted to do. But since then, no. It's just, like I say, the books just kind of, it seemed like the natural way for me to carry on showing off.
Okay. And you've, so as you said, but you finished the book before lockdown, and then you've been unable to promote it out on the road, so to speak, with books, but you haven't managed to, I kind of expect you'd already finished the draft of the next book.
No, well, so lockdown happened. I'm sure you've heard this from lots of writers, that not just that they couldn't write, but I've heard the expression reader's block. It was difficult to read in the first few weeks. I couldn't read anything longer than a tweet. And I just remember that, you know, end of March, everyone was just scrolling and going, "Oh my God!" It's just this thing outside the front door. Since then, I've read a lot more than I usually do. I must say, I've been reading more than I have since I was a teenager. Sadly, not as many. I mean, I looked at it. I've made it pathetically, childishly. I have a done pile of books that I read during lockdown because I'm so proud. And because I'm slightly inspired by Andy Miller, who is a critic and writer, and you see him on Twitter, and every month he publishes this massive photograph of books. So what he gets through in a month, I've got through in like 4 months.
That's all right.
But it's kind of half fiction, half non-fiction. But I've realised, and in fairness to myself, the girls have only just gone back to school, and then I did a week's filming. So we're only really, and then I've got to talk to lovely people like you. So I'm only really starting now to panic about being unemployed. I mean, being in between novels. But it feels like it's not going to happen like last time. I can't just sit here and wait for a good idea to come along. I think I have to write my way into it. There are a couple of ideas, and I think I should start trying to write some short stories and see if they get out of control. And then there'll be less, because at the moment I'm feeling quite a lot of difficult second albumness coming on, because you kind of, with the second one, you either confirm that you're going to be this fluffy, funny, eager to please, rom-com-y kind of, or I could take it in a different direction. And so I just want to try and write lots of different things first before I give the next book to presumably Canongate. I mean, you know, but I think these things have to be negotiated, don't they?
Yeah, I think they do. So there'll not be. I've lost my train of thought now. So you don't have. Forget that. Okay, so we don't know what the next book's going to be, but there will be one, hopefully, Robert.
Yes. No, I didn't want to write one book. I want to write 10. Yes, I fully predict the second novel in the spring of 2022.
Well, people say, who was it said? I only write when I'm inspired, and I see it that I'm inspired at 9 o'clock every morning. Because
No, I like the sound of that. And also, I mean, the people are full of good advice. I just haven't followed any of it so far. I like Philip Pullman saying, the muse won't necessarily show up, but you have to be in. But you have to be ready. You have to be sitting at your desk just in case she appears. So yes, now now that school started again, I have no excuse.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much again for joining us, Robert, for this event at Belfast Festival and Westival, and good luck with your next book whenever the Muse does visit.
Thank you, John. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.